The great hall shimmered beneath chandeliers of crystal flame, their light glancing off polished marble and the gleaming eyes of wolves dressed in silks and silver. Music had stilled hours ago, yet the air trembled with expectation, the scent of dominance, perfume, and cruel amusement thick as fog. Lyra Valen stood alone at the center of the hall, her pulse fluttering like a trapped bird. The ceremonial dais beneath her bare feet felt cold, almost alive, as though it could sense the humiliation that was about to unfold. Her pale gown clung to her shoulders, delicate and unadorned, a quiet defiance against the gold-threaded luxury surrounding her, every noble eye fixed on her. They had gathered for the mating ceremony, a tradition meant to bind power to power, rank to rank. Yet even before her name was called, they whispered. The weak princess, the cursed Omega, the pity of the Valen bloodline. A high priest lifted his hand, voice ringing through the silence. Princess Lyra Valen, daughter of House Valen, come forth to receive your chosen mate. She obeyed, though her knees nearly buckled. Before her stood Lord Cassian Drager, the Beta noble marked by the moon's decree as her fated bond. His smile gleamed sharp as a blade. For a heartbeat, Lyra imagined kindness there, perhaps fate could surprise her. Then he spoke, I reject this bond. The words were a hammer striking glass. The hall gasped as Cassian stepped closer, his voice carrying easily over the stunned silence. I will not be chained to an Omega who cannot even summon her wolf. The kingdom needs strength, not pity. Laughter rippled through the crowd, soft at first, then swelling. Lyra's breath caught in her throat, heat searing her cheeks. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but her voice dissolved beneath the weight of their mockery. Her brother, Prince Rowan, leaned lazily against the throne, smirking as if he had expected nothing less. Even their mother did not rise to her daughter's defense. Lyra's heart pounded painfully. You don't know me, she whispered, but the words vanished under the laughter. Cassian bowed mockingly. The bond is broken. He turned away, leaving her standing beneath the cold gaze of 100 eyes. Something deep within her chest twisted, an ache so sharp it almost felt like release. The mark that had glowed faintly on her wrist, symbol of their destined tie, faded to nothing. She was unbound, unwanted, and utterly free. Then the hall doors groaned open. A gust of winter swept through the chamber, carrying the scent of snow and iron. The laughter died instantly. Shadows stretched long as the Alpha King entered. He was unlike any presence Lyra had ever felt, tall, severe, wrapped in a black cloak that seemed woven from stormlight. The sigil of the Northern Dominion gleamed on his breastplate, a wolf devouring the moon. His gaze cut through the nobles as if they were smoke. When his eyes, silver like frozen steel, met hers, Lyra forgot to breathe. The king stopped before her. The silence pressed close, almost reverent. This is the royal ceremony of Valen? His voice was low, dangerous, yet smooth as poured velvet. A spectacle of mockery? Rowan straightened, bowing stiffly. Your Majesty, it is not your concern. The girl, Kale's eyes flicked toward him, and the prince faltered mid-sentence. The king turned back to Lyra, studying her as if she were a riddle carved in fragile glass. You let them laugh at you, he said quietly. Why? She met his gaze for the first time. There was no strength left in her posture, no pride to salvage, only honesty. Because fighting them changes nothing. Something flickered in his expression. You believe that? She nodded, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. They see what they want to see. The Alpha King's jaw tightened. They see weakness. Perhaps, she murmured. But sometimes weakness is just patience waiting to become power. The hall seemed to hold its breath. Kale's gaze lingered on her, too long, too deep. Then he turned to the priest. This ceremony is an insult to the goddess and to the crown. I will not leave her here to be torn apart by jackals. Murmurs broke out. Rowan's voice rose sharply. You can't take her. She is of Valen blood. Cale's tone was quiet, but it silenced the room again. Then the Valen bloodline should have protected her. He turned back to Lyra. You will come with me. Lyra blinked, unsure she had heard correctly. With you? I have use for truth speakers, he said simply. And for those who are not afraid to stand alone. She hesitated, searching his face. There was no pity in his eyes, only something colder, stranger. Her instincts screamed to refuse, to run, but her wolf stirred for the first time in years, whispering, "Go, I will come," she said softly. Cale extended a gloved hand. When her fingers touched his, the air between them shifted, a pulse, faint but undeniable, like two storms brushing edges. His gaze sharpened briefly, though he said nothing. He turned and led her toward the doors. As they walked past the stunned nobles, the crowd parted in silence. Outside, the night waited, black sky, endless snow, the world reborn in frost. At the threshold, Lyra looked back once. Cashin averted his eyes. Rowan's expression was unreadable. Her mother's lips trembled, but no words came. She stepped into the cold. The first flakes of snow kissed her cheeks, melting against the heat of her tears. Cale's soldiers closed the doors behind them with a heavy thud that echoed like the final beat of an old life ending. For a long moment they stood there, the night wind howling across the steppes. Cale's cloak flared behind him, the scent of winter steel and wild pine filling her lungs. He did not look at her when he spoke. You understand what this means, princess? Lyra's voice was small, but clear. That I have nothing left to lose. At that, the corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but something close. Good. Then you might survive what comes next. He started down the path toward his waiting riders. She followed, her thin slippers sinking into the snow. The world she had known shrank behind her with every step, its laughter fading into memory. Yet beneath her skin, something stirred, a warmth she had not felt before, faint and alive, as though a spark had woken deep inside her veins. She did not know it yet, but the touch of the Alpha King had awakened more than fate. By the time they reached the waiting horses, the moon had broken through the clouds, casting a silver path ahead. Lyra lifted her gaze to it, her heart trembling between fear and something almost like hope. The night whispered around her, quiet but certain. This was no rescue. This was the beginning of a reckoning. The northern wind struck like a living thing, fierce and unrelenting. Lyra clutched her cloak tighter as the horses thundered through the frozen valley, their breath ghosting in the pale air. The journey north felt endless, mountains swallowing the horizon, forests whispering secrets older than kings. At the front rode Cale, silent and formidable, his cloak black as the sky behind him. Not once did he glance back. When they reached the gates of his fortress, the world itself seemed to bow in reverence or fear. The northern keep rose from the cliffs like a creature carved of ice and stone, its towers wreathed in mist, banners snapping under the moonlight. The soldiers knelt as Cale dismounted, but their eyes slid toward Lyra, cold and measuring. She felt the weight of their judgments settle on her like fresh snow. Cale handed his reins to a guard, then gestured for her to follow. You will be given quarters. You are not to wander unescorted. His voice was controlled, stripped of emotion. Lyra nodded, though her pulse betrayed her calm. As you wish, Your Majesty. He paused, the faintest edge of irritation in his expression. Do not call me that when no one is listening. What should I call you, then? His gaze cut to her, silver eyes glinting. Kale. The name lingered in the air, dangerous, forbidden, human. She whispered it once, as though testing its shape. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing more and strode away down the torchlit corridor. Her chamber was vast but barren, its walls etched with strange runes that shimmered faintly in moonlight. A single fire burned low, struggling against the chill. When the servant left her, Lyra sank onto the bed, exhaustion pressing down until even her thoughts grew heavy. She dreamt of snow turning to silver light, of voices whispering from a sky made of glass. When she woke, her palms were glowing faintly. The light faded as soon as she gasped. The days that followed blurred into quiet isolation. Courtiers treated her with wary curiosity, whispers trailed behind her every step. She was the king's mystery, the rejected Omega under royal protection. Some said she had bewitched him, others claimed he kept her as a pet at the evening feast. She sat at the far end of the table, untouched wine before her. Laughter echoed through the hall, sharp, false, glittering. Lady Alara Thorne leaned close across the table, voice sweet as venom. The king is merciful, isn't he? Not many men would give shelter to a discarded thing. Lyra lifted her gaze slowly, meeting Ilara's with quiet composure. Mercy is rarely a gift. It's usually a test. The noble woman's smile faltered. Kale's voice cut through the noise, cold and even. Enough. He did not look at Lyra, but the command silenced the room. Later, when the feast ended, Lyra stepped onto the balcony outside her chamber. The night spread endlessly below, the frozen forest, the glittering stars, the wind howling like distant wolves. She pressed her hand to the stone railing and whispered to herself, "You wanted freedom. This is what it feels like." Behind her, the door opened. Kale's presence filled the space without a sound. She turned, startled. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, blood seeping through a shallow cut. "You're hurt," she said before she could stop herself. "It's nothing," he replied, but she was already moving closer. He tensed as her fingers brushed his arm, warmth meeting cold. The wound shimmered faintly under her touch, then closed, the blood vanishing as though swallowed by the air. Kale caught her wrist. "What did you just do?" I don't know." Her heart raced, fear and confusion twisting together. The faint silver glow on her skin faded, leaving only warmth behind it. He studied her, his grip firm but not cruel. "No Omega heals wounds." "I didn't mean to." He released her slowly, stepping back as though distance might explain what he had seen. "You are not what they think you are." Lyra swallowed. "Neither are you." His eyes darkened at that, though a hint of something unreadable crossed his face, regret, perhaps, or recognition. Without another word, he turned and left her standing in the cold light. That night, sleep refused her. She sat by the window, watching snow drift past the glass. Her mother's voice echoed faintly in her memory, "The moon's blood runs through you, my little star. When the time comes, it will burn and bless you both." Lyra pressed her fingers to her temple, as though she could silence the memory, but the words lingered. Before dawn, a horn shattered the silence. The alarm cry of soldiers. She ran to the corridor as shouts erupted below. Rogues. At the gate, Kale's command roared through the chaos. "Hold the line." Lyra should have stayed in her chamber, but instinct drove her forward. She reached the courtyard just as the gates burst inward, splinters flying. Shadowed figures stormed through, blades glinting in the dim light. Kale met them head-on, steel flashing, his wolf aura crackling like lightning point. One of the attackers broke past him, rushing toward her. She froze, heart hammering. The sword arced downward. Kale turned, shoving her aside, the blade grazing his arm. He snarled, eyes burning gold, but before he could strike again, something inside Lyra snapped. The blinding light erupted from her chest, hurling the attacker backward. The snow hissed and melted where she stood, her hands wreathed in silver flame. Every sound fell away, only the rush of power and her own breath remained. When the light faded, silence swallowed the courtyard. The soldiers stared, weapons lowered. Kale's expression was unreadable, shock flickering beneath his control. Lyra's knees gave out. He caught her before she hit the ground, his hands strong around her shoulders. "You said you didn't know what you were," he whispered, tears burned her eyes. "I don't." He held her gaze, his silver eyes reflecting the faint glow still pulsing under her skin. "Then it's time you learn." The words hung between them like a vow, dangerous, intimate, unspoken in meaning. Lyra felt the tremor of his heartbeat beneath her palms, the faint scent of steel and frost clinging to him. Something shifted inside her chest, equal parts fear and longing. Kale rose, still holding her, his voice carrying across the silent courtyard. "The attack is over. Take her inside." The soldiers obeyed, bowing as he passed. Lyra's head rested against his shoulder, the warmth of him was almost unbearable. For the first time, she did not feel small. She felt powerful, and that terrified her more than any blade. As they entered the fortress again, she whispered against his chest, barely audible, "What happens now?" Kale's answer was quiet, but it carried the weight of fate. "Now, princess, we find out whether your power will save us, or destroy everything." The torches flickered as they passed, the walls echoing with distant wind. Outside, the storm began to rise again, as if the world itself had sensed what had awakened. The fortress had changed since the night of the attack. Whispers filled every corridor, rumors carried like embers in the wind. Servants crossed themselves when Lyra passed, and guards avoided her gaze as though one look might summon the silver fire that had burst from her hands. Even the air seemed different, charged, watchful, waiting. Kale had confined her to the upper wing, though not out of cruelty. She saw it in the way his jaw clenched whenever someone mentioned her power, in the sleeplessness behind his eyes. He was keeping her close, but not because he trusted her, because he didn't. Days stretched thin. Lyra tried to make sense of what she'd done, but memory blurred whenever she reached for it. The silver light had felt alive, ancient, and terrifyingly familiar. When she asked Kale about it, he deflected, saying only, "Power like that has a cost. You should pray you never have to use it again." One night, unable to bear the silence, she crept into the library, a cathedral of shadow and dust. Moonlight poured through stained glass, painting the shelves in pale blue. She found an old volume bound in cracked leather, the title half-faded, Chronicles of the Lunar Bloodline. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The drawings mirrored what she had seen in her dream, wolves crowned in light, their eyes burning silver. "You should not be here." Kale's voice cut through the stillness. He stood in the doorway, cloak half unfastened, his expression unreadable. "You knew," Lyra whispered, the book shaking in her hands. "You knew what I am." "I suspected," he said. "But I hoped I was wrong." "Why?" "Because power like yours doesn't stay hidden. It's hunted." He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. The lunar bloodline was erased for a reason. They were gods trying to live as wolves. "I'm not a god," she said, though even as she spoke, she wasn't sure it was true. "No," he replied softly. "You're something rarer, someone who still has a choice." Their eyes met, and for a fleeting heartbeat, there was no distance between them, no titles, no walls, only the quiet ache of recognition. But the moment broke as a knock sounded on the door. It was Elder Sereth, the old seer whose blind eyes saw more than most living men. He bowed deeply to Cale, then turned toward Lyra with trembling reverence. "Your mother foresaw this," he said. "Before her death, she swore that her daughter would carry the moon's fire, and that when it rose again, the kingdoms would tremble." Lyra's breath caught. "You knew her?" "I served her," Sereth said. "And I hid the truth of your bloodline so that you might survive." Cale's voice hardened. "Why tell her now?" "Because others already know," the old man whispered. "Your brother sends word through the southern passes. He rides north with allies who fear the return of the Moon Queen." The words struck like thunder. Cale's jaw tightened. "Rowan dares to cross into my lands?" "He does more than dare," Sereth said grimly. "He brings poison and politics with him." Cale dismissed the seer and turned to Lyra. "Stay within the keep. Promise me that. You can't lock me away. Until I know who you are, I can." His tone left no room for argument. He turned sharply and left, the doors closing behind him. Lyra sank onto the nearest chair, the weight of revelation pressing against her chest. Her brother was coming, not to rescue her, but to destroy what she had become. The thought should have frightened her, yet a strange calm settled in her veins. She had been powerless her whole life. Not anymore. That evening, Cale returned from the council, his armor streaked with frost and fatigue. She met him in the corridor before he could retreat. "You can't keep me ignorant," she said. "If I'm the danger they think I am, then teach me to control it." His eyes softened, almost imperceptibly. "You think this power can be taught?" "I think it can be understood." "Isn't that what you fear most, that I might understand it better than you?" He exhaled slowly, the sound caught between frustration and admiration. "You are impossible." "I've been called worse." Something in him cracked, then a quiet surrender. He gestured toward the training yard. "Fine. Show me what the moon's fire can do." The snow crunched beneath their boots as they stepped outside. The night was silent, the sky awash with stars. Cale stood before her, his sword drawn, its edge gleaming. "Focus on the feeling you had that night," he said. "The moment before it happened. What did you feel?" "Fear," she whispered. "And something else, like remembering a song I'd never learned." "Then listen to it." She closed her eyes. The cold pressed close, the world shrinking to breath and heartbeat. Slowly, warmth bloomed in her chest, small at first, then spreading, pulsing in rhythm with her heart. When she opened her eyes, her hands glowed with soft silver light. Cale lowered his sword, awe flickering across his face. The glow faded as quickly as it came, leaving only the echo of power humming beneath her skin. "You're getting stronger," he said, "or closer to losing control." He smiled faintly. "Sometimes they're the same thing." For a moment, they stood in silence, breath clouding in the air between them. Then the gates of the keep creaked open, a messenger stumbling through with snow on his cloak. His face was pale. "My king, the Valen army approaches. They've crossed the ridge." Cale's expression darkened. "How many?" "Thousands. Led by Prince Rowan himself." Lyra felt the world tilt. "He's come to kill me." Cale's gaze met hers. "He'll have to go through me first." The night erupted into motion, orders shouted, torches flaring to life, soldiers running through the courtyards. From her balcony, Lyra watched the horizon burn with the glow of distant fires. The storm was coming, and this time it was not the snow that threatened to bury the north, it was her past. She turned as Cale entered the chamber, his armor gleaming like liquid moonlight. For the first time, she saw not just the Alpha King, but the man beneath, the one who had fought too many wars and found no peace in victory. If we survive this, she said quietly, what then? He hesitated. Then you decide what kind of queen you want to be. Her throat tightened. And if I fail? Then the world burns brighter for the attempt. He reached for her hand, his fingers brushing hers in a gesture that felt both accidental and deliberate. The air between them hummed, alive with unspoken things. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains. The storm had arrived, and with it, the reckoning they both had been running from. Cale turned toward the door, his voice low, steady, final. Stay close to me when the fighting begins. Whatever happens, don't let the light take you. Lyra watched him vanish into the shadows, the weight of his words sinking deep. She did not yet know what he meant, but part of her already feared it. When the wind howled through the open window, it carried the scent of war, and beneath it, something older, stirring once again in her blood. The hall was in chaos. Shadows crawled up the marble walls as the storm outside raged with unnatural fury. The chandeliers swayed, their crystals scattering fragments of trembling light over faces twisted with fear. Lyra stood in the center of the throne room, her bare feet leaving trails of light upon the cracked floor, her eyes burning silver like molten moonlight. The chains around her wrists, once symbols of humiliation, had turned into ribbons of energy, pulsing with her heartbeat. Across from her, Alpha King Kalen's chest heaved with a mix of awe and terror. He had seen power before, brutality, strength, bloodlust, but nothing like this. The very air bent to her command. Lyra, he said hoarsely, his voice barely cutting through the roaring wind, you have to stop before it consumes you. Her lips parted, trembling, her voice layered with echoes of something ancient. It's not consuming me, Kalen. It's freeing me. Lightning split the sky, spilling through the tall windows and striking the floor beside her. The nobles screamed, scattering like frightened crows. But Lyra stood still. For years she had been mocked, called cursed, the rejected Omega princess, too weak to shift, too lowborn to lead, too soft to survive. But the power thrumming inside her now told another story. It was not weakness that had been sealed, it was divinity disguised as fragility. From the shadows behind the throne, a figure emerged, Lord Alaric, Kalen's most trusted advisor, his expression no longer kind but cold, serpentine. So, he hissed, the bloodline awakens at last. You think your power will save you, girl? That same magic destroyed your mother. Lyra's breath hitched. The memory of her mother, her soft smile, her mysterious disappearance, flashed before her eyes. You lied to me, she whispered, realization dawning. All those years, you told me she abandoned me. Kalen's jaw tightened. Alaric, he growled, the sound almost feral. You told me she was executed for treason. Alaric's smirk curved like a blade. And you believed it, my king. Just as your father believed the lies before you. The Omegas were never weak, they were too powerful. Too dangerous to let live. The room shook. The storm outside obeyed her anger. The wind howled, and with it came the voices of ancestors, Omega queens who had been silenced, erased, buried beneath centuries of dominance. Lyra lifted her hand, and the sigil glowing on her wrist flared like a sunburst. Then it ends with me, she said softly, her voice trembling not from fear but certainty. Alaric raised his hand, summoning dark fire, power borrowed, corrupted. It flared toward her in a streak of black flame, but Kalen was faster. He leapt between them, his claws emerging, his wolf half manifesting. The fire struck his chest, and he roared in pain. Lyria screamed his name, rushing forward as he staggered, but before she could reach him, Alaric sent another strike, this time aimed at her heart. Lyria closed her eyes. The world slowed. She remembered every humiliation, every whisper, every cruel laugh, and then she remembered Kalen's hand reaching out for her when no one else did. She drew in a single, steady breath, and let the power answer her pain. The blast that followed shattered the glass windows, extinguished the torches, and silenced every voice in the hall. When the light faded, Alaric lay on the ground, his body dissolving into ash, his last words a hiss of disbelief. Kalen collapsed beside her, blood staining his tunic. She caught him, her trembling hands pressing against the wound, but the magic wouldn't stop it. Tears blurred her vision. "You can't leave me now," she whispered, the plea breaking like a fragile wing. He smiled faintly, the storm reflected in his eyes. "I never saw your power as something to fear," he rasped. "I saw you." Her heart splintered. "Don't say goodbye." "I'm not," he whispered. "Because I am part of what you are now." His hand fell limp, and for a heartbeat, the storm stopped breathing. Then, from her tears, light spread. Her power reached into him, not to resurrect, but to bond. Their souls intertwined in a pulse of ancient energy. His eyes flew open, now glowing the same molten silver as hers. They rose together, the world around them trembling, a fusion of Alpha and Omega, strength and grace, rage and mercy. When they spoke, their voices merged into one. No more kings. No more chains. Outside, the storm cleared, revealing dawn for the first time in weeks. The court knelt in silence. The rejected princess who had once been mocked now stood as the true heir of both moon and beast, a queen born not from submission, but awakening. Kalen turned toward her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "What will you do now, my queen?" Lyria looked toward the horizon, where light met shadow. "Rebuild. And teach them what power truly means." The throne behind her crumbled to dust as if acknowledging the end of an era. The pack would remember this day, the night the Omega rose and the world was remade by her hands. Her gaze softened as she turned to Kalen, their bond thrumming like the heartbeat of the realm itself. "Together?" "Always," he said, and when their lips met, the world exhaled. The wind carried the scent of rain and wild roses, the first peace their land had known in generations, and somewhere beyond the fading storm, the voices of the forgotten Omegas whispered in approval. Thank you so much for listening. If you felt her power rise with every word, don't forget to subscribe and stay with us for more stories of love, fate, and the fire that awakens within us all.